You guys all know the spiel about the recording stuff. If you don't want to be here, you can leave if you don't want to get recorded, or you don't have to say anything while we're on here, whatever. Okay, let me get that out of the way. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to talk about is big agile concepts. This is kind of some of the really important concepts in agile that drive agile and make it work. We're going to talk about the manifesto and a lot of the ceremonies in agile, but I'm going to get a couple of the really big things out of the way here first. So the first thing I want to talk about is a user story. This is kind of like one of the things that's at the heart of agile. And a user story is Agile's answer to requirements. A lot of times what we end up doing here is we have requirements, and then we take those requirements and create user stories out of those. Hello? Do we have a question?
What? Where?
Okay, I think somebody might want to go on mute.
Hey, Matt, it might be best if you just mute everybody,
and
then people unmute as
Yeah,
needed.
I would do that. Let's just do that.
I'm just looking over here.
I think I can.
Well, now I'm asking if you guys can hear me because I think I did mute myself. I didn't. Okay. So the user story, that's Agile's answer to requirements again. A lot of times you will have requirements that will be broken down into user stories, and each of the user stories will be broken down into smaller sub-stories or tasks or things like that. So a sample of the sample format for a user story. As a user, I want my widget to collect customer information from the customer so that I can send them a bill, target them for marketing, have a way to reach them, should an issue arise, blah, blah, blah. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, who's it for? That means who wants this story and what do they want to do with it? And then what that who wants, that's the next thing, what that who person wants. I want my widgets to collect customer information. So that's the next thing that we look at in that user story, and why the who wants it. And that is so that I can send them a bill, target them for marketing, have a way to reach them, should issues arise, blah, 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 all the stuff that we want to know. So it helps us to define what they want. We get kind of a definition of done comes up a lot. That'll be a definition you probably want to be familiar with. Other people have different definitions for definition of done, but you guys will decide what that is on every one of these user stories. That is probably a concept you'll see on the exam, by the way, definition of done. When the story is done, how do we know that it's done? So this is an important kind of concept, and a lot of this makes a lot more sense, helps us make more sense out of the requirements when we say, as a user, I want my widget to collect customer information. So if you are a person who's in a center, a call center, and you have to collect this information, maybe it is the call center agent wants this so that they can collect this information. But you know who's asking for it, which helps us better understand what they need that information for. The what they want, that's the meat of it. But sometimes when we ask for something, it's what we're asking for is clouded by our own perceptions, our own point of view. So we say, this is the point of view that you want to be looking at. This is your audience for this particular what. And then why they want it. If somebody says, I want a ox cart so I can go really fast, well, you can, hey, there's a problem here because an ox cart doesn't go really fast. So what is it exactly? We can break these things down and we can better understand what it is that they want by why they want it. So this is one of the things that we do with the user story, and this is one of the key components of Agile. So anybody have any questions about this? If you don't understand the user story, Agile is going to be a lot of problems for you on the exam. Any questions? Everybody kind of got the concept of a user story? You'll have lots of these user stories, and you may decompose them just like we talked about with work breakdown structures and things like that. You can decompose these things down into very, very small atomic particles, sort of, depending on how far down you feel like you need to break them, just like we did when we talked about a work breakdown structure. We don't break it all the way down into, if I'm building a house, we don't drive it down into each nail that you put in there. You don't have to go that low. So same thing with the user story. All right, if there's no questions, I want to move to the next slide here. All right. So the who question lets us know who should be looking at this, approving it, critiquing it, etc. One of the nice things about that user story and that who is we can go back to them and ask them questions about it while we're working on delivering it to them. If it's an agent that needs to know this, we can talk to an agent and say, explain this a little better to me. Tell me more about what you're looking for, blah blah blah. So this helps us out with that. The what tells us what we're going to build. Of course, we just talked about that, and why informs why we're building it. If it's a send a bill, then we want to know the part of the customer information, including email address, physical address, or some other way to route a bill to the customer. So when we're asking these things, if they tell us we need to collect information, this helps us define what information it is we need to collect. Now, they should give us this information as well, but if this is missing, we would recognize it right away. Hey, you want to send a bill, but you don't have a way to route a bill to that customer. So that's important stuff for us to keep things on track. It also again, I talked about this, it speaks to the definition of done or the completeness of the work item. So if they say this, we want to be able to do this, 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 and this, and you look at that story and you can't do these things with this story, when you finally are completed, when you think you've completed it, well, guess what? You're not done yet. So this helps speak to that definition of done and how complete the work is. Any questions on this? I don't feel like I'm going really fast here, but I just want to make sure you guys all got this. And I think a lot of you might already understand this. Agile's been around now for a while, so probably a lot of you have already done Agile stuff or at least had some training with Agile, even if you haven't used it yet. Nothing? So far, so good, huh? All right. Well, let's push on then. So now we have the minimal viable product. This is a second humongous Agile concept that you kind of have to understand. One of the things that we do in Agile is we do iterative development. So we start with a small thing, that would be the MVP, and then we add on and we add on and we add on until we get the final product that they need. The nice thing about the minimal viable product, we can start with a sunny day scenario. Hey, this is, we're going to collect their information, we're going to put it in a database. Hey, that's all there is to it. We don't have to worry about error messages or any kind of editing or auditing or any kind of stuff like that. We don't have to worry about all the other stuff. We just want to collect that information right now and make sure that that works. That would be our minimal viable product, and we'll go into this. So as an example, as a user, I want my widget to collect customer information, blah, blah, blah. We talked about that. And the MVP might be creating a web page that allows user to enter their personal information and store it in a database. And that might be it. That might be your MVP. I want to be able to do that. If I can collect that information, hey, then we're there. So later iterations will build checks to prevent duplicate customers. So if somebody comes back in and tries to put themselves in again, they're already there. We can build other things in. So you would have additional stories to eliminate, to prevent duplicate customers or invalid email
This is where
addresses.
we are. This is where we, what we need. A progression,
I'm sorry. Somebody have a question? Hello?
I think you got to put everybody else on mute again.
Okay. Whoop. Sorry, unmuted all. All righty. Okay, so does anybody have any questions right now? You can take yourself off mute, ask a question here if you'd like. If not, we'll kind of move on. All right, so our later iterations, we can build in checks to prevent duplicate customers, invalid email address, other exception handling, stuff that has to happen out there. We can also move further in and add more stuff. You know, our original thing was so that I can send them a bill, target them for marketing. So we might end up building into these stories ability to extract that information back out of the database to send them a marketing message or to send them a bill or to, you know, to if they call and they say I got a problem, you can be able to look them up to see that they really have an account with you or whatever. So those kinds of things get added on iteratively. So we get a thing right out of the gate, and we got a product that actually works. Now we don't necessarily want to deploy it right away. But hey, we have something that we could use to collect customer information as soon as we're done. As soon as we finish this MVP, we're there. And then every little bit that we add on to it makes it more functional. And maybe we say, okay, well, we're got something out here that's functional and we could put it out in production if we need to, but we're going to wait until we get all of these things done, and then we'll release it so that people can do all these other stuff. We can collect all the information, but we don't want people to be able to put in duplicate information. So we have to wait until we get those user stories done, but it's something that could be done. It's something that could be deployed. So that's the minimal viable product, and it's very important. Again, Agile is iterative. It's very iterative, and you don't start out of the gate with, I'm going to build a house. You start out of the gate, I'm going to excavate a foundation. Once I have that done, then I do the next thing, and then I do the next thing, and I do the next thing. Like a foundation probably isn't a task that you can say, okay, I'm done, but you could get the walls and a roof up, and you're technically, you got a product. Nobody wants to move in, but you could sell it as is, and people could do whatever they want with it, finish it out however they want to finish it, and so forth. So that's Agile, and that's what we're looking at there, minimal viable product. This is going to probably also be a concept you'll see on the exam. Any questions about this? Hang on here just a moment. Oops, sorry. Put that off your screen there. All right. Okay. Work in progress, our WIP. This is another task, another concept in Agile that we talk about a lot. This one comes up more in Kanban. You see it in the Kanban version, flavor of Agile, but it's important all the way around. It's work in progress. WIP is work in progress, and we want it to be small. I don't want to be juggling 10 tasks at the same time, or 5 tasks, or 2 tasks even. As a team, everybody on the team might each have their own task to do, but even then, sometimes you don't want to. You want to make it. You want to have a small amount of work as possible in progress. And the reason for that is, example, like you're cutting your weekend yard work. You're doing that. You got to cut the grass, edge your walks, trim the hedges, pull weeds, all that kind of stuff. So work in progress, let's just say, okay, well, I am by myself and I'm going to cut my grass, and I cut a couple of rows of the lawn. I stop, put that away, get on my edger and edge down one side of the walk, and then I trim a hedge. Then I cut another, get the lawnmower back out. I cut another row of the lawn. I pull a few weeds. I edge the side of the driveway, and then it starts to rain, and I got nothing completed. So this is the problem with work in progress and the Agile concept of the minimal viable product. We always want to have as little as possible left hanging. In baseball terms, leaving men on base. We don't want to leave the little as possible. We want it left on base here when we're doing this. So we get done, we get out there, we can cut all the grass. We're done with that. We did this. And then if it hasn't rained yet, then I can go edge. And oh, hey, I got all my edging done, and then trimming the hedges and pulling the weeds. So part of that is we don't want to leave undone work out there. And we run out of money, time, effort, whatever. We don't want to have a whole lot of undone work or partially started work. Let me rephrase it. We don't want to have partially started work out there. We want everything to either be done or not done yet. Not started yet is ideally where we want to end. So we didn't add all the bells and whistles that they want, but we gave them the minimal work that they were looking for. Any questions or concerns about work in progress right now? You guys understand that? Now, you might not see that work in progress in that terminology on the exam, but you'll see it in other ways out there on the exam, and it helps to inform you on those questions out there. So I doubt they'll ask you a question, what is work in progress, but you'll understand that, hey, one of the things we want to do is not work a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll continue on this concept in a second if nobody has any questions so far. All right, so let's move on to our next slide here. In the second example here, we talked about you didn't finish everything, but you completed one or more of your MVPs before the rain started. So we just talked about that. Hey, I cut the grass, at least the grass is cut. I can go back out and edge later, but my yard doesn't look weird because I got 2 rows of grass cut and 1 edge cut, and a few of my hedges are partially trimmed. Also, one of the other problems with having multiple pieces of work in progress at a time, a lot of people call it multitasking, and it's really, we can't multitask. We serial task. We stop doing one task and we start doing another one. We're not really cutting the grass and edging at the same time, or in the world of IT, we're not coding and testing at the same time. We're code, and then we stop coding and we test, and then we go back and forth and back and forth. So we don't really ever multitask. We're just not, people aren't cut out to do that. Our brains aren't designed for that. And one of the problems with that is when you stop one task and you start another one, that requires overhead. And then when you switch back again, you got to pull everything back out again, and you got to get yourself back in the line. And it might mean, you got to figure out where you left off cutting the grass, where you stopped edging. You may have to unplug stuff and replug stuff in. All that extra overhead costs time and money. So getting this one little task done, we got everything we need to start it, we got everything we need to finish it, we go through that whole task and we're done. We're not ramping up and ramping down and ramping up and ramping down for all these individual tasks over and over again. We just ramp up once, we get it done, we ramp down. So that is one of the reasons. The second reason why we don't want a lot of work in progress is because of the overhead that it costs. Now, they might not phrase that way either, but that's also going to be another important concept for you on the exam. That's it for WIP. Does anybody have any questions about WIP? Work in progress. Any questions about that? All righty. So now we're going to go talk about ceremonies. Agile is really big on ceremonies, and I will tell you out of the gate, when I first started doing Agile way back and when it first came to AT&T, I was not a big fan of Agile or ceremonies. Working as a project manager, I saw Agile as just a lot of small waterfall projects put together. And to a certain degree, it is. It is semantics, but it actually has its place, and it has a very good place, especially the way we're doing development today, or we're trying to do development today. That works out well. At the time when I was doing it, we had a lot of monolithic projects, and trying to do some of that stuff via Agile was like next to impossible because everything was tangled all up into itself. So it was difficult to just break out one little thing without having to make sure that we didn't mess something else up. As we get more and more object oriented, as we get more and more into microservices and things like that, Agile makes more and more and more sense. As we get down to, we have our tasks, our deliverables are very, they do one thing. That's where we're trying to get to. We want them to do one thing and do that one thing really well. And so that's Agile perfectly designed for Agile, or Agile is perfectly designed for that. So that's one of the things that we're looking at now, and this stuff starts to make more sense, and it kind of helps make things move. And part of the thing we talk about with Agile in these ceremonies, if you read about it, or if you've read about it already, especially if you're trying to get up to speed on this stuff for the exam, and you haven't used Agile before, they will give you a million different ways to do a million different things, and you don't have to use them all. It's the same way we talked about with the PMBOK. In the PMBOK and in waterfall projects, they give you 3 methods of estimating, and there's actually a lot more methods, and maybe use all of them, maybe use none of them, maybe use some of them. You don't have to use them all. This is the PMBOK gave you guidelines for the best practices if you use those things. And this is what Agile and these ceremonies and all these games and things that they do, they are best practices if you want to use them, but if you're not using them, it's not a big deal. So let's go ahead and jump into our first ceremony, and that was that vision. And it's you sit together with your product owner to create a vision. So as a project manager or as a scrum master or as an agile team, you're going to work with that product owner, the person who you're working for, essentially, the guy who says, this is what I want for my people out here. So when we had talked about that user story, as a user, I want this, that as a whatever person, that as a user is somebody that the product owner is responsible for in some way, shape, or form. So they're creating a vision. They want to kind of get a big picture of what you're looking for. Use design the box exercise, elevator pitch, or project charter. These are different. Again, Meg was just talking about with these ceremonies, we have different ways of doing stuff. You don't have to use them all. Design the box exercise, which I don't really know what that one is, so that was an example that they gave. You can look it up if you want, but it's not something you have to do every time a design the box exercise. The elevator pitch, that's just kind of a short statement, a summary, an executive summary is an elevator pitch sometimes. Our project charter, which if you've read the PMBOK and you've gotten through chapter 4, you already know what a project charter is. They talked about that in a great deal. And a project charter was essentially our formal, let's get started. So this vision, this is what that vision statement is, this vision thing that you set down every 6 to 12 months, you put this together. And this is, again, this kind of goes along the lines of not a project, but a project team, which is something that Agile actually is interested in and tries to make is at the heart of this whole thing is this Agile team. And this vision is designed around the Agile team, not necessarily around a project. You may actually have multiple projects that you do in Agile to deliver something. In this vision statement, those projects are all part of that vision statement. And then you want to communicate and post that vision. So this is what I'm looking for. We sit down, we said, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're aiming for. And you communicate that out to the team and to your stakeholders. So that's what we're looking at there. Any question about vision? Vision statements, or they became real popular around Ben and Jerry. I think they created their vision statement about how they were going to be green and good to their employees and all that stuff. So that's the vision. Any questions at all? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Anybody? Is everybody out there? Can somebody come off of mute and say, I hear you? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, it's so quiet now.
We can hear you.
All right. All right. So the next one is the roadmap. And now some people might say the roadmap is, what's the difference between the roadmap and the vision? And the roadmap is incremental. Hey, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, but in big chunks. So this is the very non-MVP type stuff that we're looking at right now. Again, we're working with the product owner to identify features or themes. So when I was talking about that one user story, that actually could be an entire feature, or maybe it's a part of a feature, So, we're going to collect customer information, and maybe that web page that's going to collect that is the feature. So there's more to it than just collecting their information. It's creating a landing page and putting security around it and doing all the other stuff to make that one feature work. So how you divide these things up it varies across the board. You have big features that come down to user stories, and then there's tasks, but other people use different terminology. In fact, SAFe, one of the scaled agile framework, they use different terminology than a lot of other agile tools do, and they use the same terminology but with different meanings, which complicates things, because when they say a feature, maybe you're thinking of something different because your agile calls a feature something else. But just remember that you have big tasks that are decomposed into smaller, or big picture that's decomposed into smaller and smaller tasks. And then they prioritize those things in the roadmap. We say, hey, I want this first, then I want this, then I want this, I want this. We all know about prioritizing, and sometimes priorities change, and we will talk about that too. But every 2 to 3 months, you're going to go redo this roadmap, and somebody's going to say, okay, well, you know what, I wanted this 6 months out, but I want it next week. So things will happen. You'll create that roadmap for the next 6 to 9 months, but again, you do this every 2 to 3 months. So obviously, stuff that's further out or going to change. They're going, it's there to change stuff 9 months out. You may find that you need something sooner, or you may find you don't need it at all. That's like the best development of all, is when you don't have to do it at all. And then again, you're going to communicate and post that roadmap so that all of your team and your stakeholders know what the roadmap is and where everybody is supposed to be. And this is, again, another agile concept. Everybody's on board. Everybody understands. There's transparency. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but you want to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on. It's none of this need to know basis. We shouldn't have that out here. Sometimes, obviously, you have to, for non-disclosure stuff, or, if you have highly secure government type work where everybody can't know, well, then that's, it's one of the things you just have to deal with in those situations. Any questions about roadmaps? We talk about roadmaps all the time here at AT&T, and it's pretty much what they're talking about here. Questions about roadmaps? Anybody questions? All right. Well, I am still flying through this stuff here. So let's see here. Let's kind of move on. Release planning. So again, now when I talked earlier, we talked about the user story, and we said minimal viable product. We want to be able to do this. The release planning, about every 2 iterations, we slot high priority stories into the next few iterations, and then our considerations are customer priorities, team priorities, dependencies, risky items, communicate, and post the plan. Okay, so let's talk about all these things a little bit at a time here. So first of all, slotting high priority stories into the next few iterations. So an iteration or a sprint, that is usually, but not always, about a 2-week time frame that we're going to work on stuff. And let's just say in our first iteration, we get an MVP out there. We created that page that collects that customer information, but it's the sunny day thing. There's nothing for exception reporting. There's nothing in there for this or that or this or that. And we're not going to release that to them for right away once we get it. We're going to wait until we're come up to a release every 2 iterations or so. So we have more time to do other stories to make that MVP more customer friendly. So we can put that out into the public as soon as we're ready to, and they can start taking advantage of it. One of the things that we also do is it puts it out there so we can see where their problems are. People can use it and see it, and somebody can say, hey, you know what, I don't have a way to do this. So it helps us to go back. Or, hey, I see this, but this isn't what we were looking for, or I don't have the way to do this. Today, I was working on a thing. There's a tool that we have here. I guess I can use its name, AIPS, AIPS. And on my webpage, I filled out all my stuff, but I couldn't submit it, and I'm like trying to figure that out. Well, because the submit button was small and it was off the page, but there was no scroll bar. So it's like, I'm trying to figure out how to do this, and they're like, well, you can scroll down. It should be at the bottom, and I'm like, oh, there it is, but there was no scroll bar. So some of those things, you can iron those out. You got 2 iterations to iron those things out, and then you can release it to the public where it's a usable product, as opposed to releasing it to the public and then having 5 million people call up and say, how do I hit the submit button? There's no submit button. So the release gives us that opportunity to get stuff together before we're ready to release it to the public, kind of thing. When we talk about priorities, we talk about customer priority. The customer wants this first. They want to be able to do this. They want to be able to do this, and this. So they want to see that right away. Then, of course, we have the team priorities, foundational story. So say they want this story first. Well, you can't collect that customer information if you don't have a database to put it in. So we might have a user story to create a database, which the customer doesn't know about or care about, but it has to trump their priority, because if we create a web page and we send that stuff to nowhere, what is the point? So we have our own priorities, these foundational stories that we need to do. And then we have another thing called spikes. And I don't know if this will be an agile question on the exam, but just for the record, a spike is it's a user story that doesn't have a deliverable as far as an actual piece of code or an actual this or that. A spike is informational. It's almost kind of a proof of concept. Sometimes they use them as proof of concept as a spike. We're trying to figure out how we can do this, and not so much the actual, hey, this is what we're delivering to you. You get to use this. This is for us to understand what it is you want and see ways that we can, try out different solutions to make that work. And those are called spikes. And at the end of a spike, you won't have a piece of deliverable code. But in the terms of a project, when we talk about projects in general, back in the old days and now, a project can deliver an idea, a concept. It doesn't have to be an actual tangible thing. And sometimes that's what spikes are. They don't deliver tangible stuff. They help deliver us. They help us find the solution that we want to deliver most times. And then, of course, there are dependencies. We talked about that. Those foundational stories are typically the dependencies that we're talking about, but there might be other ones. And we have other things, risky items. Hey, we want to deliver this, but there's a lot of risk around delivering this before we have these other things in place. So we might change our priorities because of the risk. And then once we're done with all of this release planning, we say, okay, every 2 iterations, or this next 2 iterations, this is what we're going to do, and we communicate that, post the release plan out to everybody so they can see. Again, for transparency purposes, everybody knows what's happening. Nobody should be surprised. Nobody should say, oh, I didn't know this had to be done then. Well, guess what? We told you, and we posted it, and it was communicated to everybody. And if you're not doing that, a couple things might be happening. One is that you, as the project manager, aren't doing a good enough job of making them aware, or 2, you're doing everything you're supposed to do and they're not. So part of the job as a project manager is to make sure that all those things are happening and make sure everybody's on board and up to date and aware of what's going on. And we have meetings, and we have, for the teams, you'll have scrum calls or stand-up calls, or there's all kinds of different terminology for that too. You'll have a meeting regularly to discuss what's going on, where you are, where you expect to be tomorrow, what you did today, what you're going to do, what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, all my roadblocks, this, that, and the other. So all of that stuff should be happening all along the way during Agile. All right. Any questions about release planning? I'm talking a lot here. I'm hoping everybody's catching all this stuff. Again, these things won't necessarily be on the exam with this terminology, but understand what's happening when we're talking about that. All right. If there's no questions, I'm going to move on here. Last call. Any questions about release planning?
Oh, the only question I have is, so if you're to run into some kind of issue with the stories, then you could reshuffle or refigure your release planning?
You can, and we'll talk about that more coming up in some of the next ceremonies here. If you
Okay,
if you want to hold
thank you.
that thought, unless you have more you want to ask about that or talk about that.
Nope, that was it. I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, that's great. Here, I finally get somebody to ask a question, and I tell you to wait. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but here we go. All right, so sprint planning. Okay, pass that up. Sprint planning. So this is the sprint. This is kind of like the smallest unit of our time. So for our sprint planning, this is usually just the development team and a scrum master, and maybe the product owner is on this as also. So when you start, product owner has prioritized the backlog. Now we have a thing called the backlog and a backlog grooming session too, which they don't have on here, but we groom our backlog as well. And that's kind of one of the ways where we say, hey, I got all these stories. The backlog is all these stories that I want to do without having completely decided the order that we're going to do it. We took the stuff that we prioritized really high and we put that at the top of the list, and we said we're going to take this, and this, and this is what the sprint planning is, and we'll kind of go over this. So we start that sprint planning. The product owner, that's the PO, has prioritized the backlog. They said these are the things that I want done first, and so we know which stories we're looking at. So there's a team agreement. You guys talked about this in the starting a team, I believe. We talked about this early on. You had an agreement. You had a kind of a document for the team and your rules that you guys were planning on following and doing. So you're going to say the core hours, the scrum team time, location, late penalties, things like that might come up on your team agreement. Review your definition of done. Examples meets all the acceptance criteria, passes UAT, no Sev 1s or Sev 2 bugs, percent unit test coverage, blah, blah, blah. So ideally, from my perspective, we should have 100% unit test coverage, but we don't do that all the time. New stuff, they should always do that because we should be using what we call test-driven development, but I don't think you'll see that on the exam. So you got that, you sat down, you're sitting down in your sprint planning, and you got your rules in front of you. So you kind of have your, I don't want to say it's the rules you're going to follow while you're doing this. You're going to determine your velocity, and your velocity is back to those user stories. There's a thing we call user story points. So they assign a number of story points to each story. They say, one of the things they use is what we call a Fibonacci sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so forth. Where you just take this number and then you add this number. It's the last two numbers added together. So going from 8 to 13, you had 5 plus 8 is 13, and then to go to the next one up would be 21. So the 8 plus 13 is 21, and you break those stories down that way. And the concept behind the story points is that the bigger the story is, the more, what's the word I'm looking for? The more leeway you need. If you're going to do something very small, you can say, I'm going to do this in 5 minutes, and you're probably going to be right on the money or very close to 5 minutes. If you come back and you say, this is going to take me 3 days to do, well, maybe it takes you 3.5 or 4 days to do, or 2.5 or 2 days. The bigger the story is, the more points it has, the more vagaries there are in it. So when we have these story points, generally speaking, a team that has been working together can say we can do this many story points in a sprint, which is the velocity. So hey, maybe we can do 100 story points in a sprint. Now, just so we're clear too, and I don't know if they'll talk about this on the exam or not either, a story point is designed for the team and not for reporting up to management. My 100 story points might be somebody else's totally different 100 story points. You guys as a team agreed on a story point was going to be this amount of work. And if your team is very, very skilled, and you have another team that is very, very skilled, but the other team puts their story points at a different, assigns them differently, you may be doing the exact same task in the exact same amount of time, but one team delivered 100 story points and the other one delivered 200 story points because their unit of effort was half as much as the other guys. So they delivered twice as many story points, but they actually delivered the same amount of stuff. So think of it as a $5 bill versus a $10 bill, and those story points are bills and not and not $5 bills or $1 bills. So one is worth 5 times as much as the other one is. And at the end of the day, I bought my groceries and I used 10 bills or I used 50 bills, but it doesn't matter, because I still paid $50. So during the sprint planning, you're going to determine your velocity. You're going to say, this is how we're going to work. This is how we're going to determine how much time it takes, and this is how we're going to estimate the work that we're going to do and how much we can get done in this sprint. And then you're going to accept the stories. You're going to move the max number of high priority stories into the sprint to fit the velocity. So you're going to take as many of the high priority stories as you can that are less than 100 story points. Say that's your velocity total. And that's going to be the stories that you're planning on delivering. You'll task those stories out with hour estimates. So it's like, okay, I got these 10 stories that are 100 story points, and we're going to break those things down into different tasks, and we're going to estimate how much time it takes to do each one of those tasks. And that's what we're doing here. And then we're going to double check the commitment versus availability. So, hey, and the paperclip exercise, I'm not sure which one that is, but commitment versus availability. If you commit to deliver 100 story points, but it's Christmas week and half your team or all of your team is gone for 3 out of the 5 days of the week, well, obviously you guys can't do it. And the same thing, if you're missing people because of vacation scheduled or other things scheduled, you got to make sure that you have the time to do the stories in there. It's important that you finish the sprint, all the stories that are in your sprint, and that's the goal of Agile. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the sprint planning, everyone commits as a team. This is another Agile concept, and it's one that they emphasize a lot on the exam, is that you're working together as a team. So when you have a sprint, you sat down, you said, we're going to take these 10 stories, and we're going to deliver all of these 10 stories by the end of this sprint. It's not, well, Bob said he was going to do this story, and he didn't do it, so it's Bob's fault that we didn't finish on time. The team commits. The team says, when you did the sprint planning, somebody should have sat down with Bob, and when Bob said, I can do this, this, and this, somebody should have said, are you taking this into consideration? Are you taking this into consideration? Or Bob, the last time we had a 10-point story, you said you could do it, and you took 10 days. It's something that you constantly underestimate, and as a team, you have to rein all of that stuff in, because as a team, you're committing to delivering all of the stories into that sprint that you promised to do. And then the Scrum Master takes a note of the number of story points committed. So the Scrum Master at the end of the day, and that could be you as a project manager. You're going to say, okay, we committed to deliver 100 story points this time around, so that's what we're planning on doing. Any question about sprint planning? This is kind of at the atomic level for the Agile ceremonies. This is the heart of the work that's happening here. This sprint planning is getting the stuff together. Well, actually, the next part is, but this is the next level to that. So, any question on sprint planning? This is where you guys are going to commit to doing everything, and you do that as a team. The project manager doesn't say, Bob, you're doing this, Matt, you're doing this, Angie, you're doing this, Pat, you're doing this, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's doing that. The team decides what they're going to do, which kind of in the waterfall days, project managers assigned a lot of the work. So this is the difference between Agile and waterfall, and you might see questions about that in fact, you will. I mean, that was Luke was telling us, one of the people who took the test said there was questions about that, and that they would ask questions about, waterfall and how Agile does things differently. This is one of those things that you should know about. So you might want to make a note of that while we're here. All right. Any questions about sprint planning? Last call. Okay. Daily stand-ups. this is, I guess, really the atomic level of the agile processes. The daily stand-up, and they called it a stand-up because it has to be short. So if you go into a meeting and nobody sits down, it helps guarantee that the meeting is short. So that was kind of why I got the name Stand Up. But your entire team, that's the product owner, the developers, the scrum master, are all sitting there together, and you have 3 basic questions that you're trying to cover. What did you do yesterday? So somebody's got to come up and say, I finished this story, or I finished these 3 tasks on this story. What are you committing today? Well, I am going to do these 4 tasks on this story, or I'm going to finish this story and start this next story. I hope to get this task done on the next story. Do you have any roadblocks? Anything that's out there that's causing a problem? This is where project managers get more involved in this kind of stuff. If it's project manager or the scrum master, whomever, people that committed to doing stuff. First of all, if there's a roadblock, as a scrum master or as a project manager, your job is to remove the roadblocks or help get the roadblock removed. Sorry about that. So if this guy is trying to do this, but the interfacing application is not cooperating, it's the project manager and scrum master's job to figure out what's going on and maybe escalate to get that other team to play along better. Or, maybe it's, hey, we have to change stuff around because those guys are at capacity, and while they committed to do this, now they can't, and whatever. So as a scrum master, project manager type person, your job is to look for these blocking issues and resolve them or help resolve them. The other thing is that when somebody says, what did you do yesterday and what are you committing to today? And they say, yesterday I did this, which is work on the same stuff that I'm working on today, and they've done that for 3 days in a row. Well, if it's a small story or it's a story that they obviously aren't making progress on as a scrum master or as a project manager, it may be a good time. It is a good time to step in and say, hey, what's the problem? And that could lead to the next thing. Well, I'm trying to do this, but I'm blocked because A, I don't know how to do this. B, I know how to do this, but the old stuff is really crappy and it's a lot more difficult than we thought trying to convert it over this way or whatever. Essentially, if they're repeating yesterday and committing today to do the same thing over and over and over again, there's probably a blocking issue, and that is a project manager, scrum master, something you're looking at. And you're going to raise that as an issue and work to remove that roadblock. And maybe that it's just something was just overestimated or underestimated on how difficult it would be by the entire team, because remember, everybody committed to delivering these things, and everybody should have looked at that. Somebody should have said, hey, this is like this, or this isn't right, or whatever. I think it's going to take a lot longer. But that, as a team, you guys learn that, and we'll talk about that in retrospective parts coming up. Then after you're done and you said, I did this, the Scrum Master updates a burn down chart. Now, this is another tool that they use for Agile, the burn down chart. Essentially, it's like I got a graph of all the stuff that I plan on doing today or that I plan on doing this sprint. And then as you get things done, you work your way, you burn your way down. One of the things that we, as I have found as a Scrum Master, I find a lot of times people, when we talked about the WIP early on and about keeping work in progress small, and I would have projects where we have 100 story points, and after day 2, I still have 100 story points due, and after day 3, I still have 100 story points due, and after day 4, I still have 100 story points due. And the problem is that they're working 4 different things and a little bit at a time, so they're not finishing everything. And then by day 8 or 9, they're all the way done, or they're almost all the way done with some of those tasks. And burn down charts will point that out. If you have a lot of work in progress, a burn down chart will show you that things should be coming down pretty much at a linear incline or decline. You should have this done, this done, this done, this done, this done. Every day you should get a little bit more stuff done. And if you're doing a minimal viable product and you're taking a little chunk of everything out as you go along, then things will be done by the time you get to the end, or you can see that it's not going to happen that way. All the charting and all that stuff, all the tools don't work if people are putting a whole bunch of work in progress. They're starting 5 tasks at one time, and then they're bouncing back and forth, and they don't finish a story. They don't complete story points until the end of the sprint. And all of a sudden, it's like you have a straight line across, and then it just drops at the end of the sprint, which might be okay, but there's nothing for us to monitor. We want to see progress. We want to see how all that stuff is moving along. And if they don't do their job, then if they don't do it that way, they don't have a small amount of work in progress and not using minimal viable products, that becomes a problem. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the daily stand-up? This is a short call. This is not a place where you hash out all of your details. You know, somebody says, I did this yesterday and I'm going to be doing this today, but I've got an issue with this thing today. I mean, that's a parking lot. You take that item and you put it in a parking lot and you schedule another meeting and talk about it. You don't want to drag everybody on the call. You know, the whole team doesn't need to necessarily be involved with it. So why take up their time listening to stuff that they don't need to be involved with? So you put a pin in it and you talk about it with the people that need to be engaged. Any questions about daily stand-up? Any questions? Nothing? Okay. These are big concepts. Hopefully everybody, has everybody already done Agile before? There's a lot of you folks have done Agile before. Am I telling you new stuff here? That is a question. Anybody can answer it. Yes or no? Hello?
I've done some of it, but you guys have also done a very good job of kind of injecting it into our other the other lessons, I guess, if you will.
Okay.
And the books too. So you're just going more in depth than some of the books. So
right, and that's why we're doing this one. Again, this was kind of we put this together to fill that one gap because the other stuff you won't be getting on the exam. So I'm glad to hear that that's going on. Hopefully this stuff will help you on the exam. You guys are sort of guinea pigs. Everybody's kind of sort of guinea pig this year because this is a totally brand new exam and stuff here. So we'll move on then. All right. So last one here, backlog refinement. Okay, and this is actually, I guess, more along the lines of what I call the backlog grooming. So about 1 hour a week, they review upcoming stories for the next sprint. When I say that, that's usually the product owner. He's saying, okay, these are the things that are coming up on the next sprint. These are the things that are high priority for me. These are the low priority things for me. You're going to work with the Scrum Master and the team to size the backlog stories for the upcoming iteration. The people who are doing the work are going to say, this is going to take us 4 story points. This is going to take us 4 hours or 4 days or whatever your story point thing is. So this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to size those things coming up. Your goal is to have about 3 iterations of work sized. So you will have, let's say you're going to do 100 story points per iteration. So you probably want to have about 300 stories already 300 points of stories already sized and ready to go. And you want to have that kind of in advance because stuff is going to get booted off and they're going to get pulled in, or other things are going to happen. But you don't want to go too far out because some of those things, the whole nature of Agile is that the best use of your time is to not develop code that isn't needed. So if somebody has a story that does this and it turns out you don't need it, well, maybe you just saved yourself 50 story points or 100 story points or whatever by eliminating that story. So if you spend time sizing everything, you might be spending time sizing things that you don't need. And you probably, the stuff that you're working on right now, you probably are going to need because you're kind of working 3 iterations in advance. The stuff that you don't need is probably going to be the stuff that's further down the line. Not always, but probably. And then you might also go out and capture more detail on those stories. So you're refining your backlog so it's easy to move the stories that you want to work in the next iteration into your next iteration and hit the ground running. Any question about backlog refinement?
Yes, who's involved?
Backlog refinement is the team. So it's the Scrum Master and the developers, but it is also the product owner. That is essentially the team. And if you are the project manager, you're probably looking at this too. You might be working it as the Scrum Master. Again, it's a role that's wasn't really designed for Agile, but it fills that gap. I do, as a project manager, I do that role quite a bit. Work as a Scrum Master, but then I do other things as well. Does that help? Any other questions on this?
Yes.
And again, I don't know if they'll have these actual ceremonies on the exam. So, I mean, it's good to know who's doing what, but a lot of this same stuff is going to be common. It's going to be the product owner and Scrum Master and the project manager and the development team are going to be doing a lot of these things. You'll be working a lot of the same stuff over and over again. Okay, any other questions? Actually, I have a couple minutes after 6 right now. Why don't we, let's see, what do we got here? 6:02. So I have 6:02 right now. Why don't we come back at 6:12? And then we will continue from there. You folks can go grab yourself a glass of water, some iced tea, soda, whatever, take a bathroom break, heat up your coffee, whatever. And I'm going to be right here. Actually, I'm going to take a break too for just a few minutes, but I'll be right back. And then if anybody has any questions while we're waiting, you can ask me those questions. All right. I'm going to let you guys go for 10 minutes, and we'll see you back in 10.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, I am back. So, anybody have any questions about anything so far that we've covered? Any other topics that we've talked about? While we're waiting, we got 8 more minutes here. Any questions at all? Makes it easy for me. So, Chris, how's it working so far? You guys are getting a feel for this?
Yeah, you're covering the material at a good pace with good detail.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I'd like to have more slides to kind of decompose that a little more, but
Yeah, but your slides have good content. I mean, they pretty much tell the story. Obviously, you know, having you talk it through makes a big difference. But I mean, the slides they have a lot of detail in them.
Well, good. So you guys gonna be ready to teach this topic on the next one?
Yeah, your laughing tells the story, doesn't it?
I have no idea. I'm just laughing because it's
No, I know. We'll
this
see.
whole thing of they just radical shift was boy, that just threw us all for a loop. And then it's trying to teach folks. I tell you what, those first people that took that test, I mean, that had to be scary. I mean, not knowing not knowing if you know all the material or not. It's when I took my exam, it had been a couple million people had already taken the exam and blogged on it and everything. We saw everything there was to know about stuff, and if you did your due diligence, I mean, you could be pretty confident going in that you were going to pass that thing. And now it's like, well, they gave us all the material, but I have absolutely no idea how much of that material is on the exam. Fortunately, we have people
also
like
noticed,
Luke. I'm sorry?
PMI just came out with a beta version of a study, kind of like a study buddy kind of program. It's on PMI.org. Yeah, and it's in a beta, so it's $15. I don't know, Rachel, are you on?
Is it $15 for members or $15 for everybody?
For members, and it's good for 4 months. I think it gives you access to everything, and it's kind of like Exam Wizard plus more. Like a forum that you can share insight with, as like a community, as well as some tools. I don't know, Rachel Ragsdale, are you on? She might not be back from break yet. She's she's on my team, and she had shared it with me, and I took a look at it. It seems pretty interesting.
Oh, well, that's cool. Yeah, they need something like that. I guess they're trying to monetize this a little more, unfortunately, but
yeah. Instead of everybody else coming up with tools to assist, they figured they might as well do it themselves, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's good because they are the at the end of the day, they're the source of the information to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that they're saying it. I just, sometimes you remove the what's the word I'm looking for? You remove the competition and you get not such good work, because you're the only one doing it. You got a monopoly on it.
Right.
But it's nice to know they're working on that. I was 7 came out. I'm a member of PMI, so I downloaded the new one. I was going through that. It's pretty good. It's comprehensive. I like the concept that where they're getting to. I kind of wish they had started moving this direction before and did it a little more smoothly. But
yeah.
But they're covering a lot of stuff. The big thing that I have, I guess, issue with is this concentration on Agile makes it a concentration on IT, and I guess maybe that's where most of their PMP certified folks are in that category. But I mean, I've worked with PMP certified contractors, like construction and stuff, and I don't know how this works for them,
Can you post the link to the site you were just talking about, where you could do sample testing, much like the Exam Wizard?
Was that
yeah?
Was that on PMI.org though? Is that right on their website?
It is.
Yeah, so
it's a page on there. I'll find the link to take you straight to that page, and I'll drop it into the chat right now. Hold on a second.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That would be good. And then and could you send that to me in an email too? I'm gonna put that I'm gonna send that to Brian to add to the wiki.
Yeah, certainly.
So I have that too. Any resource out there, a lot of the resources I have now a completely totally useless directory of all kinds of stuff that I vetted. That we had test questions and things like that, and now it's
start all over again. No, I know.
Yeah. But I guess the nice part is I don't really have to. Hopefully, we don't have to vet stuff that's coming from PMI. They should all the stuff that they're sending us should all be vetted already. It should all be accurate. but hopefully they're not nickel and diamond folks, in that, you know, you got to get this, and at the end of the day, you spend another $200 to make sure you got all the material that you need for the exam kind of stuff. But we'll see. Hopefully it's not going to be like that. I'm kind of a cynic when it comes to those kinds of things, so. But I get proven wrong a lot, so I am a happy camper to be proven wrong about those types of things. And we'll just have to, time will tell. But on the good side, there is tools out there, and then and I know people have passed this exam, so it's feasible. Everybody can pass this exam, so still got to put in the time. I'm sure. I know Luke put in a whole bunch of time, and he reached out to a whole bunch of people. But I think if you got the material down, hopefully you will do well on this one. And we'll try to do our part, make sure that you have all the information you need. All right, a little bit less than a minute left here. We'll move on to the next one. And I got 12 after. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Sprint review. This is the next Agile ceremony. And the sprint review, it's the last day of every iteration, about 10 minutes. Close out your stories from the sprint. So you're comparing to the definition of done and updating. I don't know what the CBC is, but you're gonna, at the end of the sprint, you're gonna go through your iteration. You say, we delivered all the stuff that this is what ideally you should be doing. Your sunny day scenario here is, you're gonna look at all the stories that you covered, and you're gonna say, yes, we did all of these things, and this story, this was the definition of done, and we met that definition. This is the definition of done, and we met that definition. So at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for in your sprint review. You're going through it and saying, we got all the stuff that we needed to do done and complete. All right, any questions about that? That's a pretty simple one. All right, demo. Now this is another thing, and this here has demo the last day of every iteration, and actually that's not my preferred way to do this. I'm going to kind of go through both of them, but essentially it's the same thing. You take all the stories for everyone in the org that's interested, particularly the people who are impacted, and you actually demonstrate that you did the story, your coding, whatever you were doing is what they were looking for. So you demo, let's just say it was that customer, you're collecting customer information. You demo that for the user, who, you know, the call center agent or whoever that user was, and you say, okay, so they come in, they go to the web page, they enter their name, they enter their address, they do this. This is the time where they get to sit back and say, oh, that isn't what we thought of at all. That's not what we're looking for. Or this is exactly what we're looking for. Or we really like this, but we really need this too. Or we want this, but we want this differently. And those things, those people at that demo will sit back and they will put all that stuff together, give that to the product owner, who will create stories to make changes necessary to get things done. And it may prioritize things higher or low. A lot of the stuff coming out of these reviews, these demos, is going to be low priority stuff. You know, hey, we really want more contrast between the letters and the background, or we want this, or we want, you know, the stuff that's doesn't impact the actual usability, but cosmetic stuff definitely gets prioritized low. And it goes like that. So that's what we're doing with the demo. Any question about demo? That's going through and actually showing your work to the folks, and this is the opportunity for them to come back and say, hey, this is a problem or this is not a problem. And if you have a, you know, if you've had a 10 sprint thing, well, you catch these things real early instead of waiting until, hey, we're all done with the project. Now let's demo the whole thing to the team or to the users, and all that stuff that we had problems with early on. Now we got to go back and fix all those. So this is why we do this demo. And here they do it at the last day of every iteration. Myself, I prefer to do it as soon as they complete it. Once you finish, demo it. Let them see it right out of the gate. And that gives us even more time to go back and fix it if we need to. Any questions about demo? This is a simple ceremony one. All righty, retrospective. Now here is the kind of one of the big things in Agile too. And this retrospective, this concept will be on the exam. And I believe they'll even use the word retrospective when they talk about it. They may not, but this is for the team, this is directly for the team, indirectly for the users. So the last day of every iteration, you're going to sit down and you're going to say, what did we accomplish the action items from the last retrospective? So on sprint 1, somebody said, you know what, this is great, except for we way overestimated how much stuff we could get done. Did we accomplish that when we, on our last retrospective, we said, hey, we way overestimate? Did we do a better job of estimating these things now? And then you're going to sit down and say, what went well? What did we do now that was just phenomenal? You know, maybe when you do your stuff, you're working what we call XP and you're doing paired programming, and somebody said, you know what, we get even though we have 2 people working on every story, we're getting stuff done just as fast because, you know, 2 people working on this one thing, you know, me navigating and that person driving and going through this whole stuff, we get through these stories twice as fast and they're twice as good. So that maybe that went well, or maybe something else went really well, or then of course you got the what didn't go well. What did we have problems with? Is there an action item we can take out of what didn't go so well? What are the things we want to focus on and changing next time? Update the team agreement definition of done with these items. So there's that team agreement again. You know, you talked about that. We talked about that early on in one of the earlier chapters. When you're forming that team, you kind of have an agreement for the team to say, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do this. And maybe you thought those things and you decided that, hey, that doesn't really work so well. We're finding that's not such a good thing. So let's do this instead. So you update your team agreements, or you update your definition of done when somebody says, hey, well, you know, we got all these things done and we met the definition of done, but the client still wasn't happy with it, you know, because whatever, I mean, it's there. So when you do this retrospective, this is designed for the team to improve themselves. This is part of our self-improvement process for the team. So, and then otherwise make visible so they're not forgotten. So either you update it and you say, we're going to change these things, or you make a note of it so that you can address them later. Maybe it was something that wasn't such a big deal, or maybe there's just too many things that you had to change, so you're going to leave some of them off for the next time and see what happens. You know, maybe you can muddle through, but, you know, change the more high priority kind of problems that we saw. So retrospective, that concept that's a big Agile concept, and that was a concept on the test when Luke was talking about it. This is something that was really big, and they've discussed it in a number of other chapters in the book. So retrospective, you guys should make sure you know what the retrospective is and what's going on there, and that is designed to improve the team, indirectly improving their product. So indirectly, it's for the product owner. So. All right, any questions about retrospectives? Okay, and that's another thing that we kind of do this. We call them lessons learned. We go through the PMP. For those of you that haven't got the 7, actually, I don't even know if 7's got it in there or not, but we call lessons learned. There's lesson learned out there. This is what the retrospectives are, although this is more team-oriented as opposed to more enterprise-oriented. But anyway. All right, next question, our next section here. Okay, we're leaving the land of ceremony and we're going into the Agile Manifesto now. We're going to talk about that. Now, there are 2 columns here that you guys should see on here. The Agile values these items over these items. So processes and tools are obviously important. A ceremony is a process. For those of you that use iTrack to track your user stories, that's a tool. There's lots of tools out there to track. I mean, dry erase board is a tool. Flip chart is a tool. So if you create a Kanban board, that's a tool. So these things are important, but it's more important that individuals and interactions, how you guys work together, and those are so they add. I'm sorry, talking. Feel like I had something to drink and I didn't yet. Individuals and interactions, agile values that over processes and tools. Working software is the most important thing, and agile values working software more than comprehensive documentation. It does not mean that you should not document your work. It does not mean you don't want to have all this documentation out there. It doesn't mean you don't want to have things documented. It means that you want to get the software. That's what's really important. Documentation is great, and people will need documentation, you know, as far as continuity of service goes. You need to have some kind of documentation of what's going on. But what's most important is that you have software that works. So agile values that working software over these other things. It doesn't mean you don't have comprehensive documentation. It means working software is more important. Customer collaboration versus our over contract negotiation. So again, we want to work with our customers. We do those demos. We show the customers what's going on. The product owner is a customer. He's telling you, he or she is telling you, this is what I want first, this is what I want second. I'm prioritizing what I want, and you're going through this with them, and they're telling you what they want to see. That's the customer collaboration, and that's really important. We have in the waterfall world, we have what we call a statement of work, a SOW. It's a contract, or the beginnings of a contract with a contractor. And so when we work with internally, we have we have what we call charter. Now AT&T doesn't actually use charters. I guess they do in some places, but I've never actually had the charter. But that charter is an official statement of work to get started. It's kind of like a statement of work internally. And then you negotiate all kinds of stuff. You're negotiating rates. You're negotiating what's this and what's that, what's this, what's that. You're laying it all down right at the very beginning, and then the presumption here is that at the very beginning you laid everything out. You said this customer said this is all the things they want, and now we're not going to talk to the customers ever again until we deliver it to them. And that's not what we're looking for. The concept here is we're going to collaborate with customers all along the way. They need to stay engaged the whole time. So contract negotiation is good to get the ball rolling, but you can't stop there. You have to continue with that customer collaboration. And then responding to change over following a plan, kind of along the same lines. We collaborate with the customer and they say, hey, you know what? I don't want that. I want this instead. I know I said this, but this is what I want, which is over following the plan. And when we talked about some of those things early on, we talked about the roadmap, and we talked about how we're updating that roadmap every couple of months. So we have a plan, but we don't have to strictly adhere to the plan, and we can respond to changes in the plan. And the plans may change for all kinds of reasons, and it's things to remember. You know, I mean, if there's we have a project that's going on because of a regulatory need, and the regulations change, you know, the laws change, and suddenly we don't need that anymore. Well, why do we want to stick to the plan when it's something we don't need anymore? So that's one reason. It just goes away. It's something we don't need anymore, and it doesn't have to be regulatory. I mean, it could be something in the market. You know, hey, people don't want landlines anymore, so let's stop planning on how to deal with those landlines and let's spend more time on mobility or whatever. So you can have plans, you set plans, just make sure that you're aware that it's more important, agile values responding to that change over sticking to a plan, just adhering to that plan to the letter, especially when it doesn't make any sense anymore. I mean, if the need goes away, that has to go away. Or if the client says, you know what, we still need this, but I don't like that look at all, we're going to change that. Or something happened in the in popular culture, and we want to capitalize on that. So now we're going to have a Star Wars fonts on our page instead, or whatever, something like that. There could be any number of reasons why they want to change, and we have to be agile enough to respond to that change. So these right here are big, and I believe you may see these on the exam. At the very least, you'll see these concepts. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And understand that these things aren't bad. These things are just more important. And so make sure you understand what we're talking about when we're talking about that. This contract negotiation, again, we're not talking, what they're talking about over here is a contract, setting everything up, and then, winding up the thing and setting it loose and never going back to the customers again. We're not for that. We certainly want to get things moving, and we can say these are the things you want right out of the bat and negotiate that contract, but then you have to go back continuously and make sure you update those. These are the things that we're talking about. Any questions on this? This is probably going to be on the test in one form or another. Any questions? Okay, well, we're cruising right along here. So they have these principles things. We follow these principles for the Agile Manifesto. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Now, again, we're back into the software land, and I'm not sure how that works for Agile or for the PMI's test now, but as far as software goes, it's early and continuous delivery of valuable software, which means we do WIP, small work in progress. We do things iteratively. We give them something, and again and again and again and again. We give them pieces of things right out of the gate until they have everything that they want, or they run out of money or time. So that's one of the principles, one of the big principles for Agile. We welcome changing requirements. We just talked about this too. They change requirements even late in development. Agile process harnesses change for customers' competitive advantage. And we talked about there are many reasons why you'll do this. Competitive advantage is obviously the big one. That covers a lot of the reasons why. Excuse me. All right, any questions about this one? So the next one here, we deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference for the shorter time scale. So kind of along the lines of what we're just talking about, delivering continuously here, we're going to frequently deliver stuff. We want to get that minimal viable product out there. Something that we can release is excellent. If our minimal viable product is something that's releasable, you get that out there, and then you make it better, and then you make it better, and then you make it better, and then you make it better. A lot of shops, even here at AT&T, they don't use the enterprise release schedules anymore. They deliver on demand. Bang, 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 bang. They get stuff that's deployable, and then they release it when they're ready to go. So, and that's kind of really big thing for safe and agile now. And it's good all the way around. The sooner things are available to people, the sooner they're getting their money's worth. All right. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. And I don't know about daily, but they have to work together on a regular basis. As a developer, it's actually kind of interesting. When I started doing project management, I was taking a class, and they passed out a cartoon, and they had 4 guys sitting at a desk, and one guy was up, and he's like, "You guys get started. I'm going to go find out what it is they want," which was kind of funny because what are they going to start on? They don't even have a clue yet. But that was very common when I started, and Waterfall kind of eliminated a lot of that, but Agile takes that a step further. We want to know what the customers want, and we want to know what they want all the time. Their ideas change. We have to change with them. They have to understand there's a cost to that change, but it's easier to do small changes here and there and here and here as opposed to as opposed to doing one big gigantic change 90% of the way through the project. So business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Regularly is sufficient, and the concept is what you're looking for the exam. Any questions on this one? This is pretty straightforward. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. This is really big as far as those first few chapters of the handbook that you guys have. They talked a lot about that, getting things together for the people and motivating them, get them on board. I mean, that's kind of the thing that you want. I don't know how to say that any better than this. Just build projects around motivated individuals. Get those guys, give them what they need, and then we take it from there. It's kind of World War II. General Patton, he was saying, as a general, his most important job was logistics, making sure everybody had all the stuff that they needed. I mean, obviously, he had a lot more strategy and tactics behind everything, but one of his biggest jobs was making sure that everybody had what they needed to do the job that they needed to do, and that's kind of what we're talking about. And that was something they have. You guys go back and look at those chapters in the handbook. They emphasize the crap out of that. So it's something to remember there as well. Any questions on this one so far? All righty. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within the development team is face-to-face conversation. This was, Luke actually talked about this on the exam. They talked a lot about co-location, and this is something to remember. The most effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face. So obviously, I mean, you can't face-to-face easily remotely. I mean, we sort of can with WebEx or other tools, but it's best to be co-located and working together face-to-face. Simple one, but that will probably be a question on the exam, something to that effect. In fact, Luke said there were several of them on his. Any questions so far? Okay, working software is the primary measure of progress, and we talked about that before too. In those working software over comprehensive documentation. So again, working software. Somebody shows me a blueprint of a house, and somebody shows me the house. Obviously, I would much rather have the house than the blueprint. The working software is the most important part here. So the actual deliverable, working deliverable is what we're looking for. If it's not in software, if you're not in IT and you're looking at other things, it won't be software, obviously. It's the deliverable. Any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward stuff, but get heads up so that when you see it on the exam, you recognize that as the question. Okay, Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. This is really important too. There are a couple things I talk about even when we were doing the sort of the waterfall model, the old version, PMP version 6 and earlier. One of the things that's really important is that you don't have heroes. You don't have one person doing everything on a team. He becomes a single point of failure, and and gets hit by a bus. He wins the lottery. He leaves. She or he leaves, and guess what? Your guys are hosed. You don't have somebody that can do that job anymore. It's not sustainable. Or, I mean, if somebody is working, and I tell people this not so much for the exam, but for filling out the application, which you guys don't have to do anymore. But it's I kept telling people that if you on the application, in order to get your hours down, if you put down that I worked on this project from here, from point A to point B, from January to June, and I'm averaging 60 hours a week, they're going to question it. It's not sustainable. 60 hours a week is not sustainable for a long period of time. I mean, some people might be able to, and you might be able to prove that, but well, now it's moot, but because you don't have to document that anymore. But the question is, or the point is that making people work weekends and nights and all that stuff. You know, hey, we got a release coming up this weekend. It's really important. You know, one time out of you know, every couple of months or every 6 months, that's acceptable. Every day, every week, well, your people are just they're gonna drop, or they're gonna leave, they're gonna abdicate. You got to you got to be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely, and so it has to be sustainable, and that's important. And that's probably will be a question on the exam as well. All right. Any questions on that one? All right.
You mentioned that we don't have to fill out the application. Is that?
Oh no,
true?
you have
'Cause I
to
thought
fill out you have to fill out the application, but now the application is not, as I understand it, they're not breaking it down into hours anymore. So you have to have this many months of continuous project management work. I don't think they're doing it by hours anymore.
Oh, okay.
But before
right.
we used to, and it was like, so people would say, well, January 1st to June 2nd, I worked on this project and I did 10,000 hours. Well, guess what? There's no way you could do that. No way you can maintain that. I don't think you can. I don't think it's even physically possible, because I don't think there's enough hours in that time frame to do that. But that's just the con. If you're averaging over 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week, you would have got called out on the exam. You would have drawn an audit with it. Excuse me. You would have drawn an audit.
They don't.
You don't have that problem now.
Yep.
Yeah, but
You don't have to
they don't accept multiple projects, which I work on. My current
Well,
county.
they accept multiple projects, but and even before, they used to say that they didn't, you know, but it was, if you worked on a project from January to June, and then you worked on another project at the same time from January to February, and another one from February to March, you couldn't count those hours 3 times. It was just January to June. So it made sense. It just looked funny until you actually understood what they're talking about. And it's the same kind of thing now. I mean, if you're working 4 projects for 3 years in a row, it's 36 months worth of projects. It's not, I worked 3 of them, so it's actually 3 times 36, you know?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You can't do that. And that's what they're looking
at. I
at.
didn't get it that way.
Yeah,
All
and
right, cool.
a lot of people made that mistake before. I'm not surprised that it's coming up again. And then you explain it, and it's fine. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, because as a project manager, I work multiple projects. Right now, I have like 6 projects going at one time, and so, you know, they're not saying I can't count the other ones. I mean, it just, before I was getting hours, my hours were divided up between them, not at the same time. But as far as continuous service goes, January to December, it was 12 months of continuous service. It wasn't, I couldn't count it 6 times because I was working 6 different projects throughout the whole thing.
So it's best to just select the longest running project and put that down so that you don't have to give too much detail on all these other projects?
Well, maybe. I mean, you fill it out. I mean, if you want to put it in there, it's fine. I mean, the application, and I tell people this too, the application is not about deciding whether you're a good project manager or not. The exam is what that's about. The application is just to show that you actually are putting in your time. They don't want a whole bunch of people spending a lot of money on a project and not have experience to do that, or people that have no experience as a project manager who can study really well. And, I mean, it's like a doctor who can pass the boards but never went to med school, or, you kind of wonder about what they really know. They know the stuff they need to pass the test, but do they know everything else? So that's what they're looking for. They want to make sure that you're qualified to take the exam, and that's essentially what they're looking for. They're not looking to say, I don't know if that they wanted to save people money. I'm sure they would be quite happy to have a bunch of people taking the test and not passing and paying for it, But it's I mean, they don't want to dilute the value of the certification. So
Got it. Thank you.
you're welcome. Somebody else have a question there? Okay. All right. So continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. I don't think that's really going to help you on the exam, but I mean, you want to do that, but that's kind of standard for just about everything that we do. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And this we talked about this briefly. If you're going through here and you don't have to do something, well, guess what? You saved yourself, maybe you saved yourself 100 story points, 100 hours worth of work, or, $10,000 worth of work, because you're maximizing work not done. You're saying, I don't need this. And that's what this is here. That's what you're talking about with this one. Simplicity. I don't know if that's necessarily my definition of simplicity, but the less work you have to do, the better. If I can deliver this same functionality that we need in 10 days, but we have 100 days worth of story points to do this stuff in, but I only need 10 days of it. If I can eliminate that 90 days worth of work, I mean, I'm saving 90% of the dollars and time on this project. So that's their simplicity here. And this is important, and I don't know if it'll be on the exam, but it should be. And if it's not, it's a good thing to know anyway. The best architecture's requirements to design emerge from self-organizing teams. This one is they talked about this too, with the whole self-organizing teams. And I'm not sure if this is, I don't know if time is actually proven this necessarily true or not. That's the stand for Agile. And I believe that the whole concept of self-organizing teams is an Agile thing, and they emphasize that in the handbook. So probably want to know that too. All righty. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts. And this was the retrospective thing right here. So we do retrospectives. This is part of the manifesto. Any questions on that one? And I think that's it. We are done. Okay, so I actually have, about 17, 18 minutes left here. Does anybody have any questions about, we'll start with any questions about the Agile stuff here that we talked about today? Any questions at all? All right, I'll tell you what, let's do this. If you want to go ahead and drop, feel free to go ahead and drop. I have no more material, but I'm going to stay on for the next 17 minutes, and I'll answer questions or entertain whatever it is you guys want to talk about. Okay, so while folks are dropping here, if somebody has any questions, feel free to ask away. Okay, the beeping has stopped. Anybody have, oh, I guess the beeping hasn't stopped. All right, so does it, oh goodness, can I stop the beep on this? Does anybody know if we can stop the beep here?
Matt, I tried to do it last time, and it even though it showed that it was muted, the entry and the exit tones, but they weren't. So it might be something you want to suggest to Brian. I don't know if he is the original host of this WebEx room. Maybe he can set it in.
Yeah, I'll ask him about it. I mean, it's I keep trying to ask if that's like, okay, that's the end of the beeps, and then they beep some more. So anybody have anything else here? Any other questions? I mean, we certainly don't have to stick around for this whole another 15 minutes here. But if somebody has questions, especially about the Agile, I'm more than happy to entertain those questions. And if nobody has any questions about Agile, I'm more than happy to entertain any other questions that you have. Let's talk about the material we've covered, or your application, or whatever.
There is a new application guide on the wiki page that was posted today. I think Brian posted it today. It just walks you through the new application, and so you don't have to call out every different domain or every different phase. It's just overall. So,
That's correct. I didn't know we put that on there on the wiki, but that is on the PMI site, that you don't have to do that continuously now, and which is really good, because before people would be sitting down and it was not very accurate. I mean, I could go back and look at a project that I did 5 years ago, and it's like, well, how much time did I really spend on initiating, and how much time did I spend on monitoring and controlling? It's like it was all an algorithm for me anyway. About 60% of my time was doing this, and 30% of my time was doing this, 20% of my time was doing this, and blah blah blah. So yeah, it's nice that you don't have to do that now, but you do need to have that project management. They do make it tougher still. I mean, it's before we were telling people to project management type activities. People that would do Girl Scouts, and now it's got to be work related. So they do make it tougher for you guys, but if you're meeting the criteria, I mean, it's a lot simpler to fill that application out now. So everybody, Brian put a link out on the wiki page, so you can see that there. Any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions? Questions. Tell you what, well, going once, going twice, sold. Okay, so that's it. Last call. We're gonna go ahead and just end this one a little bit early then, and you guys can go ahead and drop. And you guys all have a good rest of the day, and study.
Thank you, Matt. Good job tonight.
Bye, guys.